Today we're building page 9 for the children's book I've been working on called The Flock You Make. This is the sketch I'll be basing my work off of. And here are the reference photos I used. Cardinal, guinea fowl, pigeon, blue jay, barn owl, mallard, starling, sparrow. Now let's jump into it. I'm getting to work here on the first feather, which you can probably guess is a cardinal. Everything you'll see is construction paper, hand cut by me, and the extra coloring is with watercolors. When I started working in this paper collage style, I gave myself a few restrictions, because we all know restrictions increase creativity. So I decreed I could never use an X-Acto knife, never trace, and never use any rulers. To cut, I only use a pair of large seamstress scissors I got from IKEA years ago. If I have something that requires small details, instead of using small scissors, I'll just make it larger and shrink it down in the computer. So after I cut and color everything, I scan each piece of paper into the computer, open it in Photoshop, and arrange them as you see here. So the only thing you're really missing in the process is the cutting. And maybe I'll record that at some point so you can see that process too. My goal when cutting these pieces is to get them as close as possible, but then when they're in Photoshop, I can tweak them a little bit to get them just right. The next one is the guinea fowl. I really love the spots on it. It's a very unique looking bird. I remember the first time I saw them while visiting a farm with my son. We were walking down this long path, and then out of nowhere, about 30 of these guinea fowl walk onto the path and block anyone from trying to get through. I thought they were really funny. Now, since the book takes place in New York City, I wondered if I should only include birds native to the area, which guinea fowl are not. But at the end of the day, I picked birds I really liked. And to be perfectly honest about this bird in particular, I picked it to help with the rhyming that's on this page. At the end of the video, you'll see what I mean. Our main character in this book is actually a pigeon, so the next up is the pigeon feather. I grew up in Queens, and throughout my childhood I would hear people call pigeons rats with wings, but I always loved them. I think they have so much personality, I love how they flock, I just think they're so beautiful, and you can't have a book that takes place in New York City without them. Just as a note, even though this is the first upload for this project, it's not the first page for the book. I made them out of order. Whatever page I felt most excited about in the moment was the one I would work on, except for the final page, which I was dying to do the whole time, but wanted to save that as a gift to myself at the end. Here's the blue jay feather. This feather had a lot of options, because when you look at a blue jay, you'll see the feather patterns vary from their wing to their face to the other parts of their body, and this might be true with most of the feathers I'm working on, but with blue jays it just felt more pointed. I could have went with something more monochromatic like the cardinals, but when I saw that some have these dark stripes, I really leaned into it. In general, each page would take me about 4 days. I wasn't working non-stop for 4 days though. I have a full-time job and a young son, so I'd take whatever time I could to work. I worked nights, so I would usually get a few hours during the day where I could sit down and really focus. There were so many owls to choose from, and I studied a lot of them before picking this one, which I believe is the barn owl. I love that it has what looks like tiger stripes, and I think the colors are really great together. I think one of the challenging aspects of working in this style is deciding how detailed to get. There was a time when I would have assumed the right way to make this feather would be to cut each tiny individual piece of feather, which I believe are called barbs. But being hyper-realistic isn't what I'm going for. I also think having too many details in this style can make it unpleasant for the viewer. So when I look at anything I want to make in paper, I try to look at it in chunks or sections. And this feather is a really good example of that. Though in reality the feather may have hundreds of individual parts, I break it down into just a couple of sections, as you see here. Mallards are one of my favorite birds, and I love seeing them at the pond by our home. They're just so ornate. I love the shimmering colors that really pop off the feather. Unfortunately, I learned some time ago that my scanner doesn't work well with shimmering paper. I think any color that's reflective messes with the sensor and the paper just scans in as white. So I've had to think of workarounds for colors that are somewhat reflective in nature. For this, I used some really thick watercolors. So instead of watering down the paint like normal, I kept it pretty dry so it would cake on. It's definitely not shimmering, but I think it still conveys the same feeling as a mallard feather. This one is the starling. The starling is another feather that has a really iridescent quality to it. But for this one, I didn't lay the watercolor on thick. I tried using a bright watercolor against dark paper, which makes a nice contrast and I think also achieves that same reflective quality as the feather. Now this is the last feather we're doing for the page. It's the sparrow feather, and it was hard because it felt so wispy. So my strategy of breaking things up by sections didn't feel as applicable here. It also had some colors in it that just don't scan well, like the yellow. But in this case, I think the scanning not capturing as well works out. The yellows in the feather are so faint that when the colors reflected back as lighter, it was kind of a happy accident. Now we're coming to the end of this page, and I'm just making some final tweaks. I forgot to capture me making the background, but as you can see, it looks a bit like a nighttime sky. So many pages I've made already are day scenes or dusk scenes, so I thought it would be nice to do something different. Now we can go back to the beginning of the sketch, and then the final product. And there you have it. And now I'll read the prose I have planned for this page, and you'll see why I chose the guinea fowl. Mallard, sparrow, jay and owl, pigeon, cardinal, starling, and fowl. I hope you've enjoyed this work time lapse, and I'll see you again soon for the next one. Thanks. Bye.